Manchester United have finally appointed Erik ten Hag officially now as manager. And I wanted to look at exactly how Manchester United will play under our new manager. What sort of systems does he employ? How does he attack? How does he use width? How does he defend? All of these sorts of things are going to be really important, and we're going to break all of them down. We're going to look at some of these really, really closely, but I wanted to give a bit of an overarching video first, see how he plays. This is going to guide some of the transfer videos that we do in the summer, but let's drill exactly down into how he sets his team up and how Manchester United might look with him at the helm. So as you're aware, probably the peak of Erik ten Hag's Ajax, quite possibly the 18-19 Champions League run. And a lot of that side have since departed, but he has adapted and he has rebuilt that team. And for me, that's one of the most impressive things about him as a manager. Previously operating with a 4-2-3-1 under Utrecht and in the early days at Ajax, the constant carousel of departures have led Ten Hag to constantly have to adapt and update and revamp his system. He reverted back to a 4-3-3 shape when he was reunited with Haller, a January 2021 arrival from West Ham, who slotted into the centre-forward position that he previously inhabited for him at Utrecht. And he's got some principles. Tifo did a fantastic video on this one, which is well worth checking out. And it talks about like the 6 general principles of his play. So I have a similar thing with Paddock FC where we have 6 areas of the pitch that you train the lads in. So you've got your transitions to attack, you've got your transitions to defend, you have got your static build up, you have got your final third, you've got your defense at rest, and then you've got your set pieces. Now, what Tifo have done, looked at Ajax is they've looked at 6 things, very similar things: the variations in build up, the purposeful defending, the midfield fluidity, the counter pressing and aggressive marking, their width, and their attacking flexibility. So let's start on the shape in attack. How did Ajax start in attack? So what a lot of people constitute as a 4-3-3 looks a lot more like a 4-2-3-1 in practice. The reason for that is one central midfielder is far more likely to join the attack or maintain a higher position from being the pivot in front of the defence. Donny van der Beek previously held that responsibility for most of Ten Hag's time in charge. Since his move to United, that role has really sort of fallen to Dutch midfielder Steven Burgess or even David Klaassen. That role could be utilised by Bruno Fernandes at Manchester United quite easily. On the other side, the attacking midfielder is paired with 2 men who have greater defensive responsibilities than he does. And they also offer something different to the team in and out of possession. The right side central midfielder is more of the defensive anchor in the team, occasionally operates as a third centre-half, comes and collects the ball deep, is the one that's going to sit and screen in front of the defence. And he covers for the fullbacks when they push up the pitch because he just likes to play his fullbacks quite high up the pitch. This role has often been utilised by Edson Alvarez. It's occasionally utilised by Ryan Gravenberch. But Alvarez is the one that typically sees the more defensive role. Gravenberch occasionally will come deep and collect it, but if you're looking for the slightly more aggressive, slightly more defensive, it's usually Alvarez. The left side central midfielder is a more progressive, more box-to-box kind of player. And he's got a bit more poise, a bit more class, a little bit more about them in possession. First it was Frankie de Jong, obviously the next big thing in Dutch football. And then it was Ryan Gravenberch. Again, Gravenberch and Alvarez have switched roles occasionally. Maybe it's just flexibility and fluidity within the team. But Gravenberch is the one that will now typically be given the more box-to-box duties, while Alvarez is going to sit off a little bit. And both of these are behind the likes of Klaassen and Burgess. The midfield 3 isn't a 6 and a pair of 8s, the sort of very symmetrical thing that you might see Manchester City utilise. It's more of an asymmetric 6-8-10, very reminiscent of what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer used in that interim period while he was boss at Manchester United, very successfully utilising Matic as the 6, Herrera as the 8, and Paul Pogba as the 10. Paul Pogba wasn't quite a 10, wasn't quite as central, and it was kind of dog-legged. You had Ander Herrera who would do the shuttling. Paul Pogba would operate as the 10, the one given a bit more license to roam and a bit less defensive freedom. And then Matic would obviously have the most defensive responsibility and wouldn't have as much attacking responsibility. 3 very different characteristic midfielders, 6, 8 and 10. Jamie Scott's done a fantastic thread on this as well, which is worth checking out. I will link that in the description. And he mentions about Ten Hag coaching Bayern 2 for a couple of years between 2013 and 2015 under the tutelage of Pep, who was obviously the first team coach at the time. And talking about the build-up play, playing out, Ajax utilise what's known as a ring of security. So the centre-half's the goalkeeper and one or both of the fullbacks dropping in. Ajax regularly establish dominant building up against an opposition attack. Usually, you're looking for +1. With Paddock FC, we call it +1 all over the pitch, and that's achieved by working harder than the opposition. So if the opposition leave 3 men forward, we leave 4 men back, and you've got +1. If they leave 2 men forward, 3 people are enough to take the ball out of defence because you've always got that +1. Always somebody in space that you can pass the ball to. Ajax use this regularly, and they regularly build up against opposition. Mid-blocks is what they come up against the most. But if the opposition presses them, it uses a 1 or a 2, both of which very common. They've got the manpower and the technical ability to be able to pop it round them nice and easy because +1 is all we're aiming for here. They often drop one of the fullbacks. Blind is usually the go-to for this, but Mazar is common as well. To a more narrow position, giving them a ring of security. It almost looks like a back 3 of centre-halves. This helps when either fullback comes deep as a playmaker. They have space, they have time to find those vertical options to move the ball forward. It keeps the spacing nice for them as well. If they lose the ball, they're there ready to react. And it just gives them a lot of flexibility and options. And if someone clocks, like I said, Daily Blind is drifting inside to collect the ball, well, you can now push Blind up or you can have him drop off and you can pull the other side fullback in. That's quite effective as well. Ajax also frequently stagger the defensive midfielders. One of them will push higher to create a single pivot. One will drop back. The single pivot acts as their anchor, looks to hold on to the opposition forward line, making it narrower to give you space in the wider areas. Quite similar to how Pep uses Rodri, if you wanted an example of that. But also what you've got is, because you've got 3 very, very good ball players, very technical ball players, we see Bruno do this infrequently, and I think it's something he could easily do a lot more of. When the midfield 3 is static and stood still, and I hate this about United, we slow down. One of the easiest ways to create space is to create movement. You create movement, you create opportunities. Especially when you're moving, like, unless you're super slow, if you're moving laterally across the pitch, if the ball is played into your feet, you can collect it and you can move it without ever being in danger, even if you're marked from behind because the player is behind you. Rotations in that midfield 3 are something extremely key to what Ajax do. That's why occasionally you'll think Gravenberch might be the deeper lying midfielder, and occasionally you'll think that Alvarez might be the deeper lying midfielder, and sometimes Klaassen will find himself picking the ball up in those areas, all because they've just rotated. Because if Klaassen drops in, nobody picks him up, he's free. If Gravenberch pushes on and nobody picks him up, he's free. The constant rotation, it's different to what Louis van Gaal did, where people kind of was like, that's my spot, I'm going to go stand over there. That rotation in position, City are fantastic at this, especially in the wide areas. It doesn't necessarily matter who is in which zone, it's just about somebody being free, being able to get onto the ball. In terms of possession, the keys once they're settled with the ball are open up the passing lanes, have space and time to make a pass, and allow the receiver to constantly receive in an optimal manner. Something that I think United really struggle with. And this, I think, down is this technical training that develops this. Passing to the back foot. Passing to a player that is in open. You know, am I passing to a player who's in the half space, and is he facing the touchline, or is he facing the wider side of the pitch? Why would I pass to someone in there? Unless he's free and he can turn and get at the goal. But if someone's marking him, you always mark into out because you always want to be pushing wide. If I have a player receiving the ball in the half space, you can dump it to the outside and come on the inside because the player has bought it. Sensational. But for me as a midfielder passing into him, I always want to be trying to play into the open side. I always want to be playing into the wider area of the pitch. I never want to pass into an area of the pitch where we can be chopped off, pressed, or closed down. You don't want to do that. In a final third, another crucial element of their ability to combine in the final third is again down to positional rotation. The width that they desire is maintained primarily through the fullbacks. The wingers very often invert and drift inside. Hakim Ziyech was a bit of a master of that during his time at the club, something that you can see Sancho doing within the current system. Dusan Tadic has also filled that void and has got a fantastic reputation as a creator from those central areas because that's what he's doing. And this means that the movement of the wingers and outside central midfielders still remains fluid. You might see people getting beyond their wingers and into space, especially if you're the left winger and you're being tightly marked, touch tight by the right fullback. You're going to do a couple of things. You're going to take him real far wide to see if you can open up a gap between him and the centre half, because that's a nice little lane that one of your midfielders can run inside and underlap, or even one of the fullbacks can underlap into. But if he's not buying that and he lets you go, a good fullback's going to give you that space and then close you as the ball comes towards you to maintain the structural integrity of the defence. If he's staying touch tight to you no matter what, then you're going to take the guy on a walk. You're going to maybe grab his attention, elbow him, take him on a bit of a walk, pull him inside, and then maybe drag him right across the front of the D. Now, you do that, you've exposed the centre half from that side, and if the midfielder's not switched on and dropped into where the fullback was, now you've got a gaping hole and a way to get into the box and penetrate into the box. So positional rotations, when people are tightly marking you, is very, very, very key, and something that I find Ajax are very good at, and Tadic in particular is very, very good at that. On the opposite side, you've got Antony, who's actually a bit more of a width provider in the team, and he looks to maybe go around the outside to a certain degree more than you're going to get with Tadic. Tadic likes to operate in between the space. And again, Antony still comes inside. He just does it a little bit less than Tadic does. Defensively, apart from 18-19 when they were second, Ajax have topped the intensity charts in each one of Ten Hag's campaigns. This indicates that the defensive approach he takes is about aggression, and it's about pressing, it's about tackling, it's about intercepting the opposition whenever they have possession. It's about being proactive in defence. You're not going to see him hit a low block. It's not in his repertoire. From a 4-2-3-1 defensive structure, the wide players are going to provide more inside support to the forward line, limiting the central play, looking to always try and force around the outside. Narrow positioning on the inside channels allows pressure into wide areas, especially when the opposition centre-backs build during the opposition build-up play. In those moments, centre-forward is going to drop slightly, trying to screen the pivot, because very often a centre-half ain't going to hurt you. Unless you've got a centre-half who's got an absolute ping for days. Who gives a shit if the centre-half is in possession? The one ball that you're looking that can hurt you is a bit of a switch over the back, maybe onto the opposite centre-half's backside, maybe in the space in between him and his full-back. That can be a little bit dangerous, as can a direct ball into the channel if you're playing right up on the halfway line. Outside of that, the centre-half is not hurting you. He's the primary receiver of the ball. He is not the end user of the ball. He isn't going to score a goal from back there, but sometimes they can open you up from back there. So the centre-half having the ball, let him have it. You might press one of them. There's a couple of pressing triggers for someone who's maybe got a bad touch. Maybe he faces his own goal. Maybe he's playing on the wrong side. Maybe he's a right footer playing left side centre-half. And these are reasons that you might start to go and press that person. But why just let him have it and see if they'll try and play it back across. That's the one thing that you're going to want to see. When the centre-forward is pressed higher and the wingers are covering the wider areas, the double pivot and the number 10 are going to look to press a lot more aggressively into those central areas. Because if the wingers are pushing right up, they're trying to funnel the ball back, sort of into that zone in the middle on a bit of a diagonal. That's when it's going to get dangerous for you, and that's where Ajax like to pick up a lot of the ball that they won. More recently, under Ten Hag switched to a 4-3-3, Ajax have had slight variations in their defensive approach. The central striker, usually Haller, he likes to stay high now rather than dropping and covering on the number 6, which for those people going, how is Ronaldo going to fit into a Ten Hag system? If you go watch what Haller does, it's not too dissimilar for how Ronaldo sort of operates at Manchester United right now. The wingers track opposing runs into the wide areas, especially if the fullback has as aggressively press the inside channels. The number 8s are covering the inside channel very aggressively as well. They will individually jump out to support the press between the centre forward and the winger. And they're gonna. It's called a high block for a reason. The wingers support back, meaning the midfielders can focus on the area just in front of and ahead of the two centre halves. Now, Ten Hag does alternate slightly between those variations of formation, like we said, 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3. And especially in recent weeks, he's seemingly not settled as much on either one. Both formations are very similar in appearance, and they're both very fluid under Ten Hag. It's just the positioning of the number 10. Is he more central or is he off to one side? And is the number 6 a bit more central or is he off to one side? The wingers seem to push up a little bit higher when it is 4-3-3 versus when it's 4-2-3-1. The problem with this, as you'll have seen in recent weeks with Harry Maguire, any sort of stepping up out of the line, if you don't have the pace and you don't have the control, can be absolutely catastrophic, which is why transfers, recruitment are going to be absolutely vital for Ten Hag. To summarise then what you're going to see from Erik Ten Hag's Manchester United, you've had a taster of under Ralph Rangnick, but I hope that the recruitment can fill in the gaps and skill level up where we've been found wanting with the current squad. We will play football in the opposition half. We will be very aggressive and proactive in winning the ball back. We will certainly look to play football on the floor. We will look to be a little bit more technical and precise than we have been when we're in possession. We will look to certainly hold possession a lot more. And I hope you get a little bit more variety in the final third. I think the football that he plays, if he's able to replicate what he does at Ajax, at Manchester United, will be loved by our fans. And I hope he can become the sort of cult manager that I just don't think we've managed to get. We seem to have got managers at the end of their career or managers that perhaps weren't up to the job. I would love there to be a cult of Ten Hag at Manchester United, because I don't think he's going to get to that unless he brings trophies and titles and success. I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.